You guys, I am a massive, massive perfectionist, and it is with great regret that I deliver the first episode of this podcast because I spent over an hour filming it and 2 days setting it all up. And right when it finished, I had this feeling, intuition, pinging, saying something isn't right. Like, this is too good to be true. Even though I did all this running around, it felt like there was something wrong and that it was too good to be true. And finally, I get into post-production. I upload the footage. I upload the audio. It takes a long time for the audio to upload. There's issues with transferring it via AirDrop. All of a sudden, my Mac doesn't know my MacBook. And I'm just like, you guys are related. You know me. Anyway, long story short, the audio finally transferred and was uploaded. And about 47 seconds in, there is this static crackling. And about 3 minutes in, the crackling just becomes distortion. It is this horrible feedback that's coming through a new cable that I ordered for, well, I didn't order it, I bought it for my mic, and I had to basically write off all of the audio. On top of that, I was interrupted in this video 3 times by planes, motorbikes, and even a sneaky cockatoo. So I'm just grateful that at the end of the day, my camera was capturing audio as well. I was able to use that audio. I was able to keep the footage and the whole over an hour of filming because it's, in my opinion, it's rough. Like, I edited the audio as much as I could. I tried to make it sound as crisp as I could. It still wasn't as crisp as my mic. My mic was crispy, delicious, beautiful. But the topics, the podcast itself, the structure, the whole setup of this episode is organic, and I don't want to reshoot it all with that previous episode still in my mind. Like, it's not going to be organic if I do that. It's not going to feel organic, and you guys are following me for what I'm hoping is my honesty, my clarity, and my ability to tell it how it is. So without further ado, here is the honest episode 1 of Spirit Talks. And I promise you, next episode is going to be 1,000% more crispier in terms of the audio and the quality. Bear with me and enjoy your episode. Today's episode of Spirit Talks is proudly sponsored by the beautiful patrons of the Hermit Tarot's Patreon. If you would like to know more about the Hermit Tarot's Patreon community, do look for the link in the description box below. Hi everyone, and welcome to today's first episode of Spirit Talks. I'm so excited and also so nervous. The camera's here, but I'm looking at myself because I'm just a little out of my element. Gotta be honest, I'm someone who operates in a comfort zone, if you haven't realized already. So I'm very excited to present this first podcast today. It hasn't really been a long time in the making. It was a very spontaneous decision, and I scripted this podcast episode so many times before I finally realized what I wanted to do. I did have guests originally. I did think about, what topics I wanted to cover originally. And then I just thought, you know what, let's just write down a list of topics. We're not going to script anything. We're just going to go off what I have been ruminating on for the last 2 months now, maybe a month and a half. You guys. For a month and a half now, I have been in planning mode for this podcast. I have been thinking about what I want to talk about with you guys. I've been conceiving little ideas on how to look at this new chapter of the Hermit Tarot. So yeah, very excited to have you here. Now, before we get into things, there is a few things that I need to talk about. First of all, I need to address the elephant in the room. I am an Indigenous Australian, and in this last week here in Australia, it was NAIDOC week.
a day for recognizing the First Nations people of Australia, that is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So before we fully get into it, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Jabugai people, of which I am gathered here today, this beautiful filming location. This land was and always will be a Jabugai land. So really quickly, for those of you who don't know, I am an Indigenous Australian, so I do have a history, I do have blood, let's say that. I have blood that's connected to both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage, and many of you probably have heard about Aboriginal people, but I'm guessing that most of you haven't heard about Torres Strait Islander people. We are like a minority within a minority, completely different to Aboriginal folks, and very, very proud. And a lot of like the people in my grandmother's generation would get so offended when people would call them Aboriginals. So if you do know me, then my aim is for you to know about me as well. So I just wanted you to know that, yeah, I am a proud Indigenous Australian, and this past week was a beautiful opportunity for us to celebrate our heritage here in Australia and to just celebrate culture and move forward as a still active civilization, one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Very, very proud. Now, the theme of today's episode is love as an attachment. And I have been thinking about this for literally 2 months, you guys, 2 whole months. I think that the idea of love and what is healthy or unhealthy about it is something that brings a lot of us to tarot in the first place. And if this is the first time that you're seeing me, I am the Hermit Tarot. I am usually a tarot reader here on YouTube. I have my own tarot reading channel. I do other stuff too now. I've got a Twitch account where I like to react to tarot readings. I have merch. I have a Patreon where I talk about how I read tarot for my Labradorite patrons, and I also offer my fortnightly, well, we don't do that anymore actually. I do a lot on Patreon, so we're just going to leave it there. But in today's topic, we're going to be talking about the themes that inspired this channel for me, as well as what I think inspires a lot of people to pursue these alternative methods and measures of getting information. Obviously, there's a lot of studies out there. There's a lot of researched data on what love is. There is a study actually that I found very interesting that explores love as an attachment. I don't believe I wrote it down, but I will leave a link in the description box. And I can't remember who it was about. It was a doctor, and what he was looking at was how we form love attachments and what kind of equates to a secure and an insecure relationship. And I don't know if he's the one who founded that concept. I'm pretty sure that's a well researched concept that probably came out in the early 1900s. But the idea of like a secure relationship is basically that you've attached a healthy, you formed a healthy attachment style, whereas an insecure relationship insinuates an unhealthy attachment style. And the way that that psychological article talks about it is that they say that like a secure attachment is to have your own interests as well, to be sort of self-focused in a positive way, while also being emotionally aware enough to check in with your partner and to build an attachment over time rather than instantly. And what they were talking about as an insecure attachment style is when love kind of comes too fast, and it's usually because one person may be trying too much, guilty from the past, or the other person is just not wanting to try at all. They don't really know what they want, so they can't really be available in the relationship. So that is honestly what sparked me to kind of think about this from my own perspective of spirituality and my unconventional form of reading tarot as well. So today we're going to talk about the idea of conditional and unconditional love in our spiritual community, and how that kind of crosses over to this psychological concept of secure and insecure relationships. So we kind of start with this idea, well, actually, I don't know, maybe not all of us, but for me, when I first was introduced to the online tarot community here on YouTube, I was very much bombarded with messages of you're very codependent and like you're very attached and you need to stop chasing this person. And I don't think it was the reader's intention. Obviously, like, I'm a reader myself. I have so much empathy and understanding for readers. I don't think it was their intention to convey such a hard-hitting message of like, you're doing this wrong, this is wrong, you need to change that. But what I found unhelpful was that there were so many people who were quick to label what a codependent attachment style may look like without really focusing on what is unconditional love and how do you come from a more healthy way where you're not just shutting yourself off to the world and telling yourself that you're unlovable, but you're still managing to have boundaries that are healthy so that you don't just fall head over heels and end up chasing someone who is completely unavailable emotionally. So we really kind of want to look at what is unconditional love here. Now, I can't remember where I got this definition, but I will insert it here in the editing process to remind me. But basically, I Googled it because I have my own personal definition of what I believe unconditional love is, but I wanted to get like a Webster dictionary definition of what unconditional love is. And the one that I found said, accepting someone for exactly as they are, including their nature, their passions, and their interests, without attempting to change, restrict, or confine them. Understanding that while growth is natural, this could be who they are for the rest of their existence. So I put examples of this as like, say you meet your partner, and at the time that you meet them, their main interests are to just play video games all night. In every spare free moment that they have, they're on their computer or they're on their console just gaming. And you guys meet when they're like that. Maybe the two of you, have a really magnetic attraction. All of a sudden you're spending all your time together, you're spending every weekend together. And then after like a month of seeing each other, they turn around and say like, I really just want to game this weekend. Like, is that okay? I think that it is natural in some ways, like it is conditioned within us to kind of go, oh, but I'm not used to this. But it isn't healthy for us to go, but we've spent every weekend together in the 1 month that I've known you, and why would you do this now? It's this idea that that person was doing one thing before you met them, and they will continue to do that thing unless they choose to personally change that habit after you meet them. And so I think that when a conditional love bond is formed, or when an insecure attachment is formed, is when we come from that position of either wanting to change that person's habits, interests, or behavior because it's more self-serving for us, or when we choose to completely back out without communicating that we're hurt or why we're hurt without and kind of just going the complete other way, where we try to be emotionally unavailable then because we feel rejected and we're not voicing that to our partner. So it's very interesting. I love it when science and all these spiritual concepts cross over, and when you're able to kind of label them better as well. Not to say that labels are always good, because labels can be confining, but they definitely help us understand things. So I want to say that for me personally, I was someone who did struggle with having very loose boundaries when I was younger. I was someone who was very quick to overgive and overextend myself. And that behavior came from years, and I'm talking like a whole childhood of conditioning. I was always told to be kind and nice and to be self-serving in that way, like to get gratification from people in that way. And it's not a bad thing to be a kind person. It's not a bad thing to be a charitable person who wants to help others. But to expect to get all of your happiness from you controlling other people's behaviors, interests, and needs is very unhealthy and unrealistic. So from a young age, and when I entered my first serious relationship, I was this person who had very loose boundaries. And when I became attached to someone, when I fell in love with someone, I was that kind of person who expected us to have similar, if not the same, interests, to be doing everything together, to be up to date with each other's lives. I've always been an independent person, so I wasn't ever a micromanager. I was always someone who respected my time alone, and so I could respect like my partner's time alone. But I think that having loose to no boundaries really left me like wide out in the open to be completely taken advantage of. And I'm so lucky in hindsight that the person that I happened to fall in love with was someone who wasn't narcissistic or sociopathic or just a genuinely selfish person. I'm so lucky that they were just young and naive like myself, and genuinely loved and cared about me as well. But years, because I was in that relationship for probably 4 years, and before that I was doing these things for my parents, for my siblings, for my family members, for my friends. I was always overgiving, overextending myself, understanding that that's what like love is, that's what a healthy relationship is. I thought that you had to constantly be putting yourself out there in that way, giving yourself unconditionally to someone. I thought that that's what love meant. So naturally, when I did have this serious relationship, it basically ended with me realizing that I'd given every piece of myself to someone and felt completely empty inside, and there was nothing that that person did. It was strictly coming from the fact that years of conditioning with my behavior had taught me that that's how I could be happy. We'll let this cockatoo pass. That's how I could be happy. And so what happened to me, which I'm sure is common, that's why I wanted to talk about this, because I know I'm not the only one who does this. I see this in the comments of my videos. I get this in the emails that I receive from you guys. I know that many of us who are empathetic and kind people, we have that tendency to have loose boundaries and to almost have... No, I don't want to talk about that yet. We won't talk about that yet. We'll just stay on the boundaries topic. But for me, I went from that to completely rigid, because my concept of how I could be happy was obviously destroyed. And I hadn't been taught or educated on how to have a more secure attachment style and how to be genuinely unconditional. I thought that that was unconditional love. I thought that giving yourself so much and putting so much of your happiness on somebody else's actions, I thought that was what unconditional love was. So I had to kind of reteach myself. And before I actually gained the knowledge and the skills to be more secure in a relationship, I basically went into full damage control. And what this looked like was having really rigid boundaries. And I'm sure that many of you could relate to this. I was basically at a point where it was full survival mode. Nobody get close to me, nobody touch me, nobody talk to me, look at me, nobody get to know me until I know who I am first. I went into full like protector mode, and I became very withdrawn and very defensive. Not even withdrawn, I would say defensive. I've always been a chatty person, like I genuinely love talking to people, but in that period it was like very much superficial, like fickle conversations. Don't scratch below the surface, please. I'm not ready. So I do feel like flipping to the other side and having super rigid boundaries is obviously no way to live your life. You can't have successful relationships if everything that you have to offer someone is skin deep. You can't form a strong emotional bond if the conversations that you're having aren't a true reflection of who you are, and if you're constantly having to monitor and assess what you're saying. Like, it literally got so bad that I thought that I knew who I was, and I thought that I was confident in who I was, and then when I spiritually awakened, I realized, damn, I don't know who the heck I am. I don't even know what my favorite color is anymore. I don't even know what my favorite songs are anymore. So obviously that for me is what I would see as being two sides of that spectrum of having insecure attachments in love. I was meeting a lot of people at that time too. I was going out a lot, I was drinking a lot, I was dancing a lot. I was losing weight, so I was feeling really good about myself. But yeah, I wasn't forming secure attachments. I was literally just like putting out this energy of like, talk to me, and then people would leave going, who was that? Like, who are they? What are they genuinely like? Like, who is that person? Like, some people wouldn't even realize, wouldn't even know what my name was, and I would see them every weekend for like 3 months of my life. Crazy. So I feel like obviously that for me, I can reflect in hindsight, it was a period of my life where I did have a fear of intimacy and where I did have a fear of rejection as well. I was overcoming a fear of abandonment that led me to being so loose with my boundaries. So my defensive way was to just not let people get close to me. And I was genuinely afraid of having intimate connections because I thought that this person would just destroy me if they get too close. So I think that we see these attachments early on in our lives before they are even formed into like genuine romantic connections. We see these attachment styles in our family members. I'm so sorry, I don't know why the heck this helicopter has decided to patrol the Redlands Valley of Cairns at this time, but we'll let them do their thing. We see these attachments as young as when we're children, you know, and it's coming back. It's a funny helicopter. I'll try to scrub it out in post-production, but there's only so much editing can do. And I just wanted to film out here as well. I could have filmed in the filming room, but I just love this energy out here. And I really wanted to show you guys on YouTube what it's like out here too. So, as I was saying, many of you may relate to that if you've had what I would assume would be like the worst side of the spectrum of having like a narcissistic parent, someone who's very self-serving and selfish and needs you to be a good example of them or a lesser version of themselves. But sometimes it doesn't have to be that hectic. Sometimes you could just be conditioned under cultural protocols, which was the case for me, to be selfish or selfless, to be selfless and to be someone who's always giving. So I do want to bring it back to culture because it is NAIDOC week. But for me in my cultural practice, being a younger person, you have to have respect for your elders. You have to be selfless. You have to be on your feet at cultural events. You have to be the last person who sits down, the last person who eats when you're like a younger person. You have to be someone who's thinking of other people. And that was like years and years of conditioning in my behavior to be that kind of person who was very selfless and very considerate of others to the point where my own needs weren't met. Like at some of these events, you know, if the kids, the babies had eaten, the elders had eaten, the parents had eaten, the organizers of the event had eaten, we would just eat as like the kitchen crew, the cleanup crew. We would eat after all those people. And so that meant that you'd miss out on specific meals. Is that what I wanted to say? Meals, dishes, and meals. And you just have to make do with what you've got. So I definitely think that for me personally, it was a cultural practice that instilled those loose boundaries. And until I learned how to make them more healthy, I did flip to the other side. So I'd be curious to know if that's similar for you guys. Obviously, there's many cultures on this earth, and I think that traditional styles are helpful, and I always incorporate those traditional styles, but it's helpful into my daily routine, but it's only helpful if everybody in your community is coming in with that same mentality. If you have people who are coming into that mentality, taking advantage of that system because they know that they're going to eat first and that they're not going to have to wash the dishes after, then it doesn't work. It's not helpful. And it's certainly not going to promote healthy attachments and a healthy community lifestyle. So we looked at what unconditional love is, that definition, which I will figure out where I got that from. But I do want to look at exactly how we can apply unconditional love to ourselves in a modern setting as well. So that is basically where I've been for the last, I want to say, let's say 2 years. It hasn't been that long. 2 years. For those of you who don't know, I'm 25 this year. I'm 26 this year. I just turned 25. I'm 26 this year. I'm having a little bit of I had a quarter life crisis when I was 24. I did that in the background while I was filming my YouTube stuff, freaking out on how little I could achieve because of COVID, but then realizing that I've actually achieved a lot and I need to stop calling myself old and unsuccessful. But anyway, only in the last 2 years of my life have I really been able to look at a type of love that is unconditional, in my opinion, while also being healthy for me. So I apply the unconditional love concept to my loved ones. You can't apply this concept to everybody you meet. It's not healthy to do that. We're going to cover what the definition of unconditional love is again. So unconditional love is accepting someone for exactly as they are, including their nature, their passions, and their interests, without attempting to change, restrict, or confine them. Understanding that while growth is natural, this could be who they are for the rest of their existence. And if they want to change, that's on them. I just added that in. So obviously you can't apply that to everybody you meet, because you're not going to have an intimate connection with everybody that you meet. But to the people that you love, I have examined unconditional love, like in terms of your family members, in terms of the lovers that you have or the people that you're falling in love with. I've looked at it as a way of focusing that energy back on yourself instead. So this is a good starting point, is what I want to say. I probably have been doing this. Listen, there's no expiration date on self-reflective practices. Self-reflection is something that you should be doing regularly, not for other people, but for yourself. It makes you more self-aware, and it, in my opinion, makes you more successful. When I became more regular with my self-reflective practices, and I was very rigid in the beginning, when I was in my rigid boundaries era, I was journaling like every day, trying to understand myself better and why certain people triggered me in certain ways, why certain interests just weren't satisfying to me anymore. Like, these are things that I'd done for years and years and years, and I was overthinking everything. So as a helpful way of dissecting that can be to journal as well. But in terms of looking at, I've just lost my complete train of thought. In terms of looking at how self-reflection is helpful in an unconditional love style with your loved ones, it kind of just helps you take a step back and examine whether you're getting angry at someone that you love for something that they've always done that's in their nature, or whether this is new and it's scary and it's potentially damaging to their well-being and your relationship. So I recently had to go through this with a loved one as well, who will not be named because I love them dearly and I respect their privacy. But we had to kind of sit down and go, well, has this always been in their nature, or have they recently started doing these things? Like, were they doing this when you met them, or did they recently start drinking? Did they recently start gaming? Did they recently start wanting to go out a lot with their friends? Like, has that always been in their nature? And also, if the answer is no, they've recently started doing this and it's consuming a lot of the time that we could be spending together, the next question you need to ask yourself or the person who you're talking with is, well, is this hurting, genuinely hurting them or your relationship? And that part, I feel like if you're a third party involved, that part you need to just bounce and let that person and their partner figure it out. But if it's you and your partner and you're trying to figure out, like, are we healthily attached to each other? Is one of us being too conditional? Then that whole part of, well, how is this damaging our relationship? That could be dissected over hours and hours of conversations. But emphasis on conversations. It can't just be one person sitting down in this relationship and thinking about how the other person's ruining everything because of what they're doing. It has to be constructive, I want to say conversation. We're not going to even say criticism, because it's about keeping that communication open and understanding how these new behaviors or these pre-existing behaviors are impacting your connection. What needs aren't being met, for example. What triggers are being amplified because of this behavior? Is it a personal trigger, or is it a trigger that is very much a part of this relationship on both sides? You know, is the trust maybe being broken? So I feel like unconditional love can affect our love attachments if we try to explore it later on in a relationship as well. Like, I am not going to relate this to a romantic relationship, because I'm very grateful for the fact that I went through a lot of my insightful periods of my life when I had been single, because I feel like I needed to be single to be able to go through all of that. But that didn't mean that my other relationships didn't suffer. I had to go back to my family connections, to my friendships that I've had for years, and really look at, well, is this kind of attachment style secure, or is it conditional? And I think that it can take a lot of consistent work to really try to rebuild a conditional attachment style and to make it more unconditional and more secure. But it has to be both of you trying, because it doesn't work if it's just you sitting in your own room ruminating over what that other person isn't or is doing right for you. They would need to know, especially if you do love each other and you want a future together. The two of you do need to have those important conversations. And I want to say that if it is someone that you really, really love and care about, then it is going to be worth it. It isn't something that you're going to regret doing. It isn't something that you're going to regret saying. I feel like it's definitely worth having these difficult yet healing conversations with the people that we love. It helps us highlight where our own needs aren't being fulfilled and where our potential expectations are a little unrealistic as well. So I did want to talk about expectations and how that sort of comes into secure and insecure, unconditional versus conditional love attachments. So expectations, my gosh, I'm going to take a quick drink of juice before we get into this, because this part's going to slap. So first of all, it is healthy to love someone. It's essential is what I want to say. Like, we're social creatures. Even me, I'm a very chatty person, but at the core of me, I'm very introverted. So I know that if I spend too much time alone, if I spend too much time with my cards, just filming videos for you guys and pushing out content for you guys, I'm not going to be happy, and I'm not going to be fulfilling my basic human need of connection. So it is healthy to feel attached. It is healthy for an empathetic person who needs time out to also want to come out of their shell and reconnect with their loved ones. But we have to really look at expectations when we're talking about unconditional love, because they are kind of on a separate boat. Like, if we're looking at unconditional love as a vessel that's sailing the seven seas, I don't know why this concept's coming out, but okay. The expectations would be like a vessel that's also with us on the same journey, but not necessarily attached, if that makes sense. It's something that we need to be aware of. If we're going to go starboard, we need to be able to look over and go, oh my gosh, there's a vessel down there. Let's let them know that we're heading that way. But at the same time, it kind of sits on its own little island, its own little vessel, because it is a little bit different. When we look at unconditional love, we know that there needs to be acceptance for who that person is. And we know that while growth is natural, acceptance involves us accepting them as they are, for who they are. So expectations differ because they are completely personal. We're looking at someone with expectations. They may be formed from our own needs, from our own experiences. Maybe in a previous connection, we had someone that we really trusted and they broke our trust. So our expectations moving forward is that the people that we care about will be loyal, they'll be committable, and they'll be honest, you know? So meeting a new person, or even trying to restructure a pre-existing relationship to be more secure, you need to be aware of how your expectations may or may not be realistic at times. Now, in terms of realistic, it comes back to acceptance. It comes back to us knowing who they are at their core, their nature, their behavior, their interests, and what they are or are not most likely to do. So while it is healthy to have boundaries, expectations can be at times unrealistic or unhealthy if they don't align with that person's true nature and their true behavior. Does this mean that we need to bend our expectations? No. But it means that if you wish to keep those expectations, you may have to lose that person, because expecting them to change who they are at their core is not accepting them for who they are, which means that you're either getting a shell of who they are or you're losing them altogether. I want to say that, I don't know, for me personally, I'd rather have someone exactly as they are, in their true nature, living their best lives, able to offer themselves to me in the most genuine way, in a way that is fulfilling my needs, my values, my ethics, my morals, while expecting them to be nothing less than who they are, instead of having a shell of a person who is pretending to meet my expectations, who is saying things that I want to hear while doing the exact opposite. This can form a very insecure attachment style and a very conditional love style, because that person wants to be with us, but because our expectations don't meet their nature, they are pretending to be someone that they're not, and we're actually forming a bond with someone we don't technically know, or who isn't technically there. You know, it's a shell of a person, it's a pretender. Foo Fighters, Pretender. So expectations, they go hand in hand, because in order to have healthy expectations, there has to be that level of acceptance. We have to look at someone and see them for who they are, know them for who they are, accept that that's who they are, and then kind of forge our expectations around that. And either they don't make the cut because they just can't act in the way that we want them to, or we go, well, that's just who they are, and I'm going to accept that moving forward. I'm going to make healthier boundaries for myself so that their actions don't hurt me. Maybe we can't be as intimate as I was hoping, whether this is a lover, a friend, a family member, or maybe they just need to bounce all together because we just can't be happy together. That person's nature doesn't align with my expectations. So expectations are very important, but they don't necessarily dictate unconditional love. In fact, it's the very opposite. They can break unconditional love and turn it into something very, very conditional. So I do, just before we close this first episode of Spirit Talks, I just want to talk about the shame and the guilt that can come across recognizing conditional love patterns. Because for me personally, when I did awaken into this community, and when I was a very avid tarot watcher, because I spent a good 8 months, you guys, binging tarot readings every day. And when I say every day, I mean every spare minute that I had, I was watching a tarot reading. I was working my 8-hour job a day, and literally on my lunch breaks, I would be looking at tarot readings. After work, I'd be looking at tarot readings. I was just I was probably racking up millions of minutes a month on tarot readings. So in that period, I was being awakened to all this information of what conditional love is, and that I wasn't vibrating in an unconditional love frequency. And I felt a lot of shame, and I felt a lot of guilt, and I was kind of just well, why? Why am I like this? Why am I so codependent? I thought I was an independent person. Why am I so unhealthy when I come towards people? And there was shame and guilt in that, in the sense of I either pretended that reading didn't resonate with me at all because it was very much confronting and shameful to admit that, or I felt very guilty, and I wasn't focusing on how to strengthen relationships by being more unconditional. I was just focusing on, gosh, I'm a really crappy person, aren't I? I'm so unhealthy in relationships. I'm so codependent. I'm so conditional with the way that I love. So I do want to say that there is that initial feeling when you realize that you've been loving in a specific way that wasn't helpful for yourself or your partners. There is that initial feeling of shame and guilt, but there is also, you guys, there is also a lot of information out there on how to be more successful with relationships, on how to be more balanced, on how to be more secure and more unconditional. And I want to encourage you to be able to do your research as well, whether that's looking at psychology, because there is a lot of studies, and I will have that link down below for you to look at what secure and insecure attachment styles look like, or whether that's you looking and exploring community forums as well, looking at what unconditional love is. For me personally, the community forums that I found most helpful were the ones on Quora. So I don't know if you guys have used Quora, but I found them incredibly insightful. There's just also these cool little, it's kind of like Reddit in its own little way. It doesn't have, well, it does have the upvoting function, but it's a little bit different. It's like Reddit mixed with Facebook is what I would say. And Quora for me just helped kind of connect with like-minded people while staying anonymous. You have to kind of put a first name, last name. I'm probably outing myself. I used my middle name as my first name so that I could be anonymous. And it kind of just gives you the answers that you want. That's the whole idea of the website of the forum, is you ask a question and people answer it for you. And at the beginning of me using that website, it was a safe place for me to talk about these themes that I was being exposed to in tarot readings. It was a way of me understanding my shame and my guilt better, and truly getting to the core of what is a healthy relationship and what does healthy love look like. So I do encourage you, if you haven't already been over there, to connect with Cora and to really explore that forum, because it can be a safe way for you to get the answers that you need from similar people. Now, some people are professionals, but I want to say that anybody can answer a question on there. So use your discernment, trust yourself first, as we always say. These are sometimes just regular schmegala Joes who have no credentials and they just go off their own experience. But personally speaking, those answers were the most enlightening. Those answers were the ones that really hit home and that had me going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I wish I had done this sooner. So can 100% recommend Cora, absolutely. Now, what else did I want to talk about before we finish our first episode? Let me just double check. Oh, yes, of course. So the main thing that I wanted to summarize this Love is an Attachment podcast with was this idea of boundaries, because we can't really talk about expectations without talking about boundaries. So this will only take a quick couple of minutes, because I feel that many of us on this channel especially, let alone in this community, we're very aware of boundaries. Boundaries and expectations are similar, but they are different again. So I do want to make that distinction. I want to say that expectations come from your own experience, they come from your own needs, and they come from you wanting to tailor your future experiences based on your needs. That's what expectations are. The way that boundaries differ is boundaries are ways of establishing a relationship without having expectations, if that makes sense. Like, how would I word this better? I'm really struggling. I should have brought my oracle cards so Spirit could help me. That was my intention. It'll be happening in future episodes. The way that I like to look at boundaries is they kind of like the building blocks, and they're kind of forged off your values, off your ethics, off your morals. You can kind of tailor them based on your previous experiences, but your boundaries are just like the bare minimum of what you need, not what you want, not what you think you want or need, but what you actually need. So for me, my boundaries are that I know this about myself, I'm an independent person. I've said that a lot in this podcast, haven't I? Gosh, I'm very obvious about certain topics or parts of myself, but I know that about myself. I know I'm an independent person. I know that I need my downtime. I know that I like talking, so I do want connection. But when I want to be alone, I just want to be alone. So a boundary that I have when I'm getting to know someone is that I like to take my time getting to know someone. And that's not me expecting someone to act a certain way towards me. That's me saying to someone like, hey, I need you to know that I'm really like loud now and I love laughing at everything that you have to say now, but I'm a massive introvert and tomorrow I may just want to be by myself all day. So that boundaries really come from you understanding your own needs better and kind of helping a relationship start or continue to form based on your individual needs. Now, boundaries can be formed from experiences that we've had that have been hurtful, but they aren't projecting expectations forward in the way that expectations do. So, I don't know, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but boundaries are different because they're formed off your needs and what you genuinely need as a personality type to be happy and to fulfill your core nature, your core interests, whereas expectations are things that are forged specifically off your experiences, and it's how you imagine something playing out. It's how you imagine that person to act or a situation going or your relationship going. So it's very kind of parallel, but separate vessels again. And then in the middle, you have our love vessel, which is hoping to steer towards the unconditional love side. So you guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. I think that's all that I have to say about this topic, but I'm very curious to hear what you want to say as well. And I think that in future I may even live stream these episodes so that I can talk to you and really connect with you and make sure that there is this sort of banter and we're kind of having these open conversations if that's what you want. I want to say that the whole theme behind this podcast, with it being Spirit Talks, is that I will be bringing Spirit in as well, always. So I will be shuffling in these podcasts. We will be exploring themes with Spirit as well. And we'll be really just talking about these, like from my perspective, as well as with the idea of my spiritual team helping these topics come across as well. So The first episode was obviously just me sharing my experiences, but in the next episode, I do want to bring Spirit in as well. So to close today's podcast, I just want to do a fun little segment, which is called Misconceptions of the Signs. This was so fun to put together. Like when I say it was so fun, like I'm scratching the surface. I was giggling to myself last night. I was having a ball last night compiling this list. These are the common misconceptions of the 12 zodiac signs. So I'm going to address what I think a misconception of that sign is, and then we're going to talk about like what I believe a common conception of that sign is, or an uncommon conception of that sign is, something that people don't realize about that sign basically. So we got to start with Aries. Aries is the first sign in the zodiac. I'm slowly making my way through this juice. So starting with Aries, a common misconception of Aries is that they are loud and obnoxious. And I want to say that this isn't an unfair misconception. I'm sorry. But I have met some really loud and obnoxious Aries people, and they were just not fun to be around, especially when like you're just wanting to chill and their energy is very high. But I want to say that more commonly than that, most of the Aries people that I've met are actually very quiet. And if they're not vibing, like if the energy in the room isn't right, they are highly defensive and very laser focused. Like, being on the other side of an Aries person that's just trying to figure out a room and figure out the energy is scary, The thing to remember about Aries people, well, not people, let's not generalize and typecast a whole people, but a common thing to remember about Aries as a sign is that it is the first sign in the zodiac. So it's coming with this youthful, inexperienced nature that is a bit clumsy, but very determined, motivated, passionate. They're out here to gain experiences, and when they want something, they go for it. It's the first cardinal sign in the zodiacs as well. So there is this sort of quiet determination with Aries people, and if unchecked, like they just kind of boom out of nowhere. It's like bam. Quiet, bam, I'm Aries. So I feel like that's something that a lot of people forget about Aries people. Let's move forward to Taurus. Now, I actually know a lot more Taurus people than I thought I did. My brother is a Taurus. My auntie is a Taurus. And I think that's it. 2 Taurus peoples. I have a Taurus moon though, so I don't know if that counts. But anyway, a common misconception with Taurus people is that they are lazy and food obsessed. I feel like this is such an unfair justification of this massive sign with a massive potential. First of all, Taurus as a sign is a fixed energy, and it is an earth sign as well. So it kind of has this stubborn energy behind it that will achieve, even if it's not at the pace that other people expect them to. I feel like the most people that call Taurus lazy are either fire signs or air signs, because they're kind of expecting, again, expectations. They're expecting one thing and they're getting another thing with Taurus. Taurus people, they may work in different ways. Like the 2 Taurus people I know, I love them to death, and I'm sorry if you're watching this podcast, but I low-key think that they may have ADHD. And when they're put under too much pressure, they aren't able to perform at their best ability. When they aren't kind of put under this pressure, they make power moves. The 2 Taurus people that I know are very successful in their own rights. And both of them love food, but they're not food obsessed. How can I debunk the food myth? I can't really. I'm sorry, Taurus. You do love food. All right, so moving forward to Gemini now. I feel like the common misconception with Gemini is that they are two-faced and very, very chatty. And listen, the thing that you need to know about Geminis is that, first of all, they're an air sign. Second of all, they are mutable, changeable energy. So the way that I see Gemini, and this has changed my whole experience, excluding trauma and obviously unhealed hurt that continues to hurt people, because I know some Geminis, regardless of their air sign, they were just genuinely coming from a trauma place and hurting other people. So excluding that, Geminis have this ability to reflect the energy around them. They aren't necessarily two-faced, is what I want to say, is like you come here with your energy and a Gemini, like a blank canvas, will reflect it back. So if you come to a Gemini in a certain way, they will respond in a certain way. I do think that Geminis are very, very chatty though. If you can get a Gemini mentally stimulated, they will not be able to stop talking. And my rising sign is a Gemini, so that's why when you first meet me, I can't stop talking. But I don't think that being two-faced is a fair judgment call for Geminis. I think that they are definitely a sign that reflects the energy around them, and I feel like that is a common misconception of our beautiful Gemini babies. Let's go to Cancer now. Cancer is a water sign. It is a cardinal sign, and the common misconception behind Cancers is that they are either too emotional or way too caring. Now, I feel like what people don't remember is that, yes, they are a water sign, but they have cardinal energy. They are very... Listen to him. He just realized that I'm talking. He's very... I nearly swore, excuse me. He's very possessive. That's Kirk, by the way, if you're new to my channel and you don't know, that's Kirk. Kirk is an old man cat. He's like 16 years old in 2 weeks. He's a bit blind. He's a bit deaf. He has a lot of other health issues, so... his yowling is mixed between him not hearing me or seeing me, as well as just being very pedantic in his old age, very needy in his old age. But as I was saying about Cancer, I feel like people forget that they're a cardinal sign. I feel like people look at Cancer and they just see this emotional sort of watery energy. And yes, they're caring. Yes, they're compassionate. Yes, they have comfort zones. All Cancer people have comfort zones. But they're also very much like doers and go-getters in their own right. I feel like Cancer people are quiet achievers. They're out here doing things, and yes, they are caring, but it's not that they let people walk all over them. From my own personal experience, my stepmother's a Cancer. She is incredibly protective, is the word that I would use. Not too caring or too emotional. She is a hella fierce and very protective. If anybody crosses us, like her children, whoo, Lord, their name will be in the obituary section the next day. So I feel like that's what people fail to see about Cancers. So Leos, baby Leos. Obviously, the main misconception with you guys is that you have a massive ego and are very loud, like similar to Aries, loud. I think that this is a huge misconception for Leos. I've personally known at least 3 Leos in my life, and I know that a lot of famous people end up being Leos because there is another misconception that Leos with their massive egos love to be the center of attention. And I don't think that that's accurate. What people forget about Leos is that they kind of represent the 5th house energy in some ways, which is talking about romance and fun and play and a bit of drama. But it is this kind of lighthearted, child at heart energy. So I feel like this misconception of Leos having a massive ego is just like a misinformed perception of their childlike energy and their childlike nature. Leos will always be children at heart, and as long as that is what's seen first, you can kind of understand, oh, maybe they're throwing a tantrum. Maybe they're throwing a tantrum right now, or maybe this massive ego that I'm perceiving is just them trying to embrace their inner child and be less attached to what society sees of them. My mother is a Leo, and I feel like, yes, she can be very loud, but what is very damaging for her is when people expect her to act a certain way and when people try to pigeonhole her into her age. She acts appropriately, don't get me wrong. She's not out here acting in a way that's inappropriate to her age, but I see with her that the older she gets, she doesn't really age. Like, her nature is so fun and light and happy, and she's very just playful. And I feel like if that doesn't come from an egotistical place, that's just her nature of being a child at heart. So that's what I have to say about Leos. Now, Virgo babies, this is the 2nd earth sign in the zodiac chart. And Virgos, I feel like their major misconception is that they're very introverted and very quiet. And I feel like, honestly, I feel like a misconception, like, this is so cruel, I'm sorry. I have a lot of family, so I can picture, like, my brother's a Virgo. I can picture him when I'm saying this, but listen, I think that Virgos could get typecasted as that quiet kid at school, you know what I mean? That real quiet kid that people gotta, like, look at and check their books. Like, is that an enemies list? Can you get my name out of that list, please? But the truth about Virgos is they're actually a marvelously like, I'm fascinated with the Virgo sign personally, because even though they're an earth sign, you guys, their attributes are actually coming from Mercury in terms of astrology. And Mercury is an air-based planet. It's the planet of communication and thinking. So when you combine that with the earthy energy that Virgo has as a mutable sign, a changeable sign, Virgos are actually very intelligent, highly analytical, and when they're quiet, they're not just sitting there brain dead. They're planning, they're strategizing, they're scheming. Virgos are incredibly intelligent, and I feel like they may need their time to themselves, but they're also just super interesting. And I feel like you could have a conversation with them and not really scratch the surface of their depths. I can't wait till my baby brother grows up, because the conversations that we're having at his age now, he's only 7, it's just like mind-blowing. He's so smart, so clever, and is such a pure, precious soul. Anyway, I'm biased because he's family, but I feel like that's a common misconception of Virgos. So next we have Libras. Now, Libras are also a cardinal energy. They are also an earth sign. Libras, excuse me for clicking my mouth that much. I had to drink some more juice because my throat is getting dry. Now, Libras, I feel like I don't know any Libras personally, so I did have to like really do my research and look into famous personalities. Jalissa Messages is a Libra, and I can't think of anybody else except her right now. But anyway, I feel like the common misconception of Libras is that they can be very blunt and cutthroat. When I think of Libras, I think of the Queen of Swords. I think of someone who's just like walking forward in life and like leaving people behind them. And if you can't catch up, then that's on you, boo. Like, that's what I think of Libras as. Now, the truth about Libras is that they have this they have this airy energy, and they are cardinal signs. So they do like to move things forward. They like to take action in a way that a cardinal energy would, but they don't do it randomly. Like, a lot of thought goes into it, and it comes after a deliberation. I also like to remember Libras as the judges, right? So they can be very objective. And I feel like a Libra will give you at least one chance. And if you can't prove yourself with your actions, your thoughts, your communication, your behavior, then they will cut you out, and that will be the fair thing, you know? Like, I feel like Libras are very objective, and they like to see things on both sides. They're not just out here kind of doing things randomly. So yes, while they are blunt and while they could be cutthroat, I also think that a lot of planning goes into that, and that it comes from a space of genuinely evaluating the situation and trying to see, like, oh, maybe this was or wasn't like the right thing to do. Is this fair? Is this action that I'm about to take fair? And if they say yes, it is, then they're going to bounce, and you may never see that Libra again. So I do want to talk about Scorpio next. I'm actually so excited to talk about Scorpio, because obviously, the major misconception with Scorpios is that they are sex obsessed. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word on Spotify. Surely I am. They are very passionate, should we say that? They're very passionate. And I feel like they get labeled as this like completely erotic energy of mystery. But people forget that they're actually water signs. Like, my best friend is a Scorpio, and she is the most giving, kind, watery softie that I've ever met. And honestly, every time I've seen her in the last couple of years, I'm like just checking in on her and seeing, like, are you actually looking after yourself? Or are you giving too much again? Like, has anybody asked you how you are today? Like, I feel like what people forget about Scorpios is that they can be very secretive, and it's not coming from a place of wanting to be mysterious. It's coming from a place of being defensive and like needing people to check in on them occasionally. So I feel like that's what people forget about Scorpios, is they're actually big softies. They don't want to always be this mysteriously sexually attractive person. They sometimes just want people to check in on them and to ask them how they are, because they're usually the one who's doing that. From experience, Scorpios do like to disappear off the radar frequently because they need to recharge, especially if they've just been giving too much of themselves to the people around them. They just kind of need to instead of voice their boundaries, they just disappear altogether, which no tea, no shade. I do the exact same thing. So after Scorpio, we have Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the last fire sign in the zodiac, and it is also a mutable sign. So it has that sort of ability to be changeable and to not really, how would I describe it? I see it as like a gas. If we're looking at elements, mutable energies are like gas. They're very changeable and they can move quickly. Sagittarius fully embodies that energy, you guys. Sagittarius is the kind of energy that can just be here one minute and gone the next. And I feel like that is the misconception, is that they're flighty, they're non-committal, they're dodging, relationships like they're bloody landmines. But the truth is, a Sagittarius's main mission in life is to have experiences. They want excitement. They're very spontaneous. They need energetic stimulation, right? We were talking about Gemini, the other mutable sign, as being very much intellectual and needing intellectual stimulation. They're not one to focus on a topic for too long. Geminis need like constant mental stimulation. A Sagittarius personality with strong Sagittarius attributes will need constant energetic stimulation. They want excitement. They need to feel attraction to things. So I feel like a Sagittarius has often come on very strong, and a lot of people may have been bruised by a Sagittarius who was very interested in you in the beginning. They were very interested in who you were, especially if you were someone different to who they've had before. Excuse me, if you have something to say, you need to raise your hand. You don't yell, please. This is silly. I'm talking to my bloody cat again. Anyway, what was I saying? They come across as like very intense initially. If a Sagittarius is attracted to you, they could be very intense, but if the fire doesn't burn strong, yes, the Sagittarius will leave. They need energetic stimulation. They need it, you guys. And that's not anything, again, it comes with that expectations. It comes with that expectations. That person, if their track record is someone who is constantly traveling and seeking excitement, then that's not going to change just because you're a beautiful one-of-a-kind person. Like, that's just who they are. It's in their nature. So moving forward, Capricorn, I feel like, listen, I'm a Capricorn, if you haven't realized. I'm not private about it. I talk about it a lot on my channel. Capricorns are earth signs. They are cardinal energies as well, the last cardinal sign in the zodiac. And our common misconception is that we are work-obsessed and money-oriented. So orientated? Yeah, I think that's the word. Anyway, the truth is, there is nothing more dangerous than a Capricorn who is genuinely in love with their job. And I feel like a good work ethic is something that could pass down a lot of cardinal signs. It could pass down to any personality. The truth is, behind a Capricorn, from personal experience anyway, I've been in a relationship with a Capricorn before as well, and I know a lot of Capricorns. I have another brother. I know, how many brothers does she have? I have another brother who's a Capricorn as well, and I feel like we're actually very quiet and focused. And I feel like we're blessed in the sense of Saturn does influence us as a sign, and Saturn's energy can be very structured and cruel, if I'm honest. It can be very cruel. But the idea is that if you stick to it, you will be rewarded. And that is the energy that I get with Capricorn, is that if they genuinely stick to something, they are rewarded. I feel like we are creatures of habit as well. And honestly, it's probably not even a misconception. Most Capricorns will have some sort of success in their lifetime, whether it's a career or a hobby or just an interest. I feel like an underappreciated side of this sign, though, is that we are very sentimental. Capricorn suns are actually sentimental people, and they have a simpler side to them. Even if they do experience success, material success in their lives, they are incredibly sentimental at the end of the day. And the people who they love, they are very protective over as well. I feel like that's something that people forget about Capricorns. And we did talk about this on my channel before as well. So next we have Aquarius, you guys. And I feel like Aquarius, first of all, they're the last air sign in the zodiac. And they're also a fixed energy. So we talked about fixed energies before with Taurus, with Leos. Leos are fixed energies, actually. I don't know if I mentioned that. But The thing about fixed energies, Scorpio is also fixed, is that they do have a stubborn streak to them. When I see fixed, I see solid, like just solid. Just a solid rock, okay? An impassable object. Aquarius energies can be very stubborn as well, and I feel like the common misconception is that they are hard to get to know. Now, this is maybe something that was forged from my own experiences. I'd love to know it if you guys would agree with that. Are Aquarius people hard to know? I don't know. Is it just me? But I did Google this. I did Google it to check because I was like, surely I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who thinks this. Like, Aquarius people are hard to get close to. And the truth is, like, Aquarius people stereotypically are so mentally, like, thinking ahead that they automatically assume that you're not going to want to be a part of their future. And so they will withdraw early while still being friendly and kind, but they won't put energy or effort into a future unless you are showing clear signs that you want a future with them, whether they're a friend, whether they're a partner. That's apparently the main misconception with Aquarius people. And I've worked alongside Aquarius people in my previous job. They are usually people that gravitate towards charitable organizations because Aquarius in tarot anyway is the star card. And that sign is the water bearer. It's all about humanity and subjectivity, putting yourself in someone else's shoes and really getting to the core of what it is to be human in nature. So I feel like there is this healing side to Aquarians that is underappreciated. It's not that they're hard to get to know. It's that they are very intellectual, very logical, and thinking so far ahead that they automatically assume that, well, they're not really showing me clear signs that they want a future with me, so I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I'm going to be friendly and courteous, and I'm not going to invite them to my house on weekends, type of thing. Oh, excuse me, I just took another sip of my juice, and that was all celery. It was very confronting. Okay, the last sign, you guys, the last sign is a mutable sign. It's also a water sign. We're talking about Pisces. Baby Pisces. We got some fish behind me over here. I will be adding more fish to this tank as well, so stay tuned for that. Now, the beautiful and yet tragic thing about Pisces is that their misconception, similar to Capricorn, is actually true. Pisces are the last sign in the zodiac, so yes, they will be sad all the time. Pisces people do get sad. They do get down. And they do occasionally experience bouts of overwhelming existential dread. And I think that having 2 Pisces babies in my family has really highlighted that this isn't their only character trait. Like, listen, being the last sign in the zodiac is a heavy weight to bear. And while the misconception is that they can be sad all the time, Pisces people are also incredibly introspective and can offer the most profound conversations. I feel like there's a maturity there, and also like I don't care how mature I get, I'm always going to be a kid because what's the meaning of life anyway? That is so beautiful to experience. I don't know, all the Pisces that I've known, they're very like wise in their own right, but they're also just wanting to not be at the same time. Like, they also make mistakes. They also do silly things because, like, who cares anyway? I feel like they fully embody like a 75-year-old grandparent who's just kind of like, oh well, all my friends are dead anyway. Like, let me just do this instead. Like, there is a side to them that I feel is just bordering on that end of the zodiac energy of like not really caring. So let me just do what I feel is going to be best. And I think that that's something that's underappreciated, because they have this almost ingrained wisdom to simply exist in this lifetime, to not sort of do anything that isn't worth doing, and to just exist. Pisces are very intuitive, so if they feel that something is right for them, they will continue to do that, and they will do that regardless of what other people feel as well. I don't know, maybe I'm being very ambitious with the Pisces sign, but I have 2 siblings that are Pisceans and a best friend that is a Pisces. And I think of them also. I think my best friend's partner is a Pisces as well. But anyway, I think of all of them as these like really underappreciated, quiet personalities that are so much fun to be around, and yet so profound as well. Like, just that sad side of them is so introspective. When you can just sort of stargaze with a Piscean, you just feel like you're gaining so much knowledge from the universe. And maybe I'm just talking my own crap right now, but like that's something that I feel Pisces are underappreciated for. So that wraps up our first segment, you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was fun. We did cover a lot of serious things. We covered a lot of fun things. I did a lot of talking. That is the nature of a podcast, I suppose. In future, I will be filming at a different time when there aren't helicopters and motorbikes. But I do like filming out here. I like that you guys can hear the birds. I like that you guys can hear the wind occasionally. So let me know if that's something that you would like to see in the future, or if you would like me to try filming in the filming room as well. The only thing about doing that is, while the audio may be crisp, the video is going to be very boring. You're not going to be able to see this nice stuff. It's just going to be my houseplant and white walls. So I could try to make it a bit more interesting, but I feel like you get a lot more out of this physical environment. So to close today's podcast, I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank your guides, my guides, and our spiritual teams for being here to keep me safe and help me channel my own experiences. I wasn't channeling energy today, but they did keep me focused. My spiritual team kept me staying on track, should I say. Look after your beautiful selves, and I shall see you in our next podcast. Oh, and before I go, if you would like to contribute anything to this podcast, whether it's a topic, whether it's a question, because I will be answering questions, I do encourage you to head to my website and exactly this link, and it will help you put in a specific topic or question for this podcast. It goes straight to my email, but it comes in a way where it's flagged, so I know that it's about the podcast. So if you're interested in contributing topics or just questions, then head to this link and have it featured in our next episode. That's it from me, you guys. Look after yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you in our next episode. Bye!